That's right.
Pleasure to meet you.
Pleasure.
Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Robert Klein. I'm Vice Chancellor for Academic and Student Affairs. Thank you all for being here. I'd like to extend a special welcome to our colleagues who are watching online. As usual, a special thanks to the University of Kansas Health System, the School of Health Professions, School of Medicine, and School of Nursing. Their continued support is invaluable and much appreciated. I'm pleased to introduce our distinguished guest speaker, Dr. Nicholas Comninellis. He is the founder and president of INMED, the Institute for International Medicine, for whom he has been a full-time volunteer. He is also faculty in the Department of Medical Humanities at UMKC School of Medicine. Over a 2-year period, Dr. Comninellis served inner-city citizens at Shanghai Charity Hospital, and over another 2 years led a healthcare ministry in the war-besieged nation of Angola in southern Africa. Dr. Comninellis next served for 6 years in the Kansas City Public Hospital before launching INMED in 2003. He attended the University of Missouri Kansas City School of Medicine, the St. Louis University School of Public Health, and was a family medicine resident at John Peter Smith Hospital. He also earned a professional diploma in tropical medicine from the Walter Reed Army Institute of Research, and became board certified in both public health and family medicine. He has authored books including Shanghai Doctor, Where Do I Go From Here, and INMED, International Medicine and Public Health. He was recognized as a 2009 United Nations Association of the United States World Citizen and as the 2015 University of Missouri Kansas City Alumnus of the Year. The title of his presentation is The Power of Applied Learning. Please.
Like many of you, I am passionate about learning, about equipping other people with not only skills but also vision to put those skills into practice, especially on behalf of the world's most marginalized people. On arrival in Angola, I was told by my hosts to never open the door at night. Well, Angola was best known as the nation with the longest running civil war in the world. At that time, it had been going on for 25 years in southern Africa, funded by the United States and South Africa on one side, and by Cuba and the Soviet Union on the other side. And so it was a nation flush with weapons, mines, and child soldiers. And during the daytime, Angola was rather quiet and peaceful, and people went about their work. But as the sun would start to go down, we would begin hearing gunfire. And the sun would sink a little lower, and then there would be explosions. And by that time, anyone who was still on the street was in danger. And so I would always have my doors locked, my children inside. And as the sun went down, the intensity of the fighting grew. And then one evening, we were locked inside and there was a pounding at the door. And I crept up to the front of the house and I peered out, and the yard was filled with young men with rifles. Now, I don't know whose side they were on. I was not about to ask. But they kept pounding and pounding. And I knew that they were going to come in. They had that determination on them. And so I went to the front door and I unlatched it, let it open, come what may. Well, our world today is filled with forgotten individuals. People who are living on the margins of our society. Now, it doesn't matter whether you're in Kansas City, Kansas, or in Kazakhstan, there are marginalized people. Who are they? Well, sometimes they're elderly, they're disabled, undereducated, non-English speakers, immigrants, refugees, mentally disabled. And everything we're talking about today is on behalf of those individuals as well. Our world is ripe with people living on the margins right now. People who are fleeing conflicts in Yemen, in the Middle East, in Eastern Africa, in Cambodia, Thailand, Burkina Faso. Ours is also a time of disasters. What happened in Puerto Rico has gone almost as a blip in comparison to the way we responded to the hurricane that struck New Orleans. But Puerto Rico, it's the United States also. But it's not the only disaster, of course. We've seen hurricanes, earthquakes, typhoons in Southern Asia, in the Middle East, in China. It's an opportunity for us to glimpse into the lives of these people whose lives have often been decimated by a disaster. And then there are diseases. Now, the number of people who have died from Ebola this time around is quite small. But let's remember that this is a disease that has the potential to envelop the entire world. And so for this reason, attention to control of that epidemic, along with others' epidemics, is extremely important. How many cases of measles were there in Europe last year? 80,000 cases of measles and 2,000 deaths. Who died? Children. We must remain vigilant over control of such diseases as we respond in compassion on behalf of these people, diverse as they may be, people who are living on the margins of our society. Now, when we talk about poverty, we often think of the nations in the red colors and the dark colors. Nations in Southern Africa or nations in Southern Asia that are particularly living under chronic disability. But look at our own United States. In this image, in the red colors are counties where at least 2/3 of the population are living in poverty. Now, it's poverty by United States standards, but it is nevertheless poverty in comparison to the rest of the great wealth that our nation enjoys. Now, how do we respond? How do we respond to poverty? There are various motivations, and if I was to poll each of you about what motivates you to work at KU or to work in outpatient clinics and all throughout the Midwest, I would get a variety of responses. Humanitarian responses, religious responses, ethical responses. Some of you will recognize the Good Samaritan, the account told by Christ of compassion shown to a foreigner who had been beaten and robbed and left for dead. And an outsider actually was the one who came and provided care for that man that was left for dead. My own story begins with a wonderful book in high school. I was planning to become an aeronautical engineer, and as I strode through the shelves at Park Hill High School, up near the airport, I pulled off "Deliver Us from Evil." And it's the account of Tom Dooley, the St. Louis physician who was tasked with refugee care at the outset of the Vietnam War. Now, refugee care 70 years ago was not a profession. Dooley was a graduate of SLU with just a one-year internship in the Navy, put out there by his officer saying, do something on behalf of these tens of thousands of people fleeing from North Vietnam, coming across the border hungry, cold, ill, and unable to find their children. And as I read Dooley's account of compassion on behalf of these people, I thought to myself, forget about designing airplanes. This is what I want to do with my life. And so I began looking for opportunities to emulate Dooley. So I went to my dean. I asked for an international elective. That was not a thing at the time when I was going through school. And I wound up in the nation of Burkina Faso in West Africa. Now, I was a young physician at that point. I had read about tropical diseases. I had self-learned everything I could. And I noticed that all of these women were bringing their children to me, and they had lumps on them. They had lumps on their heads, on their chests, on their abdomens, on their thighs. And these lumps were a little warm, and they were a little tender, and a little fluctuant, and a little red. And I thought, this must be what? Bug bite? I thought it was an abscess, right? And so I numbed them up, I injected it, I incised it, and what came out? That's right, it was a big white parasite, about the size of an earthworm, popping out of this kid. Well, this is filariasis, onchocerciasis. And the adult worm produces microfilaria that circulate within the child's bloodstream and cause blindness and kidney failure, strokes. And I realized at that point, if I'm going to do this as a profession, I've got a lot to learn. And so I began looking for a mentor. Look at the way we educate people. There's been quite an evolution over the last few years. It used to be we would design curriculum based on what's taught. I am going to teach these learners about microbiology. We're going to do parasites. We're going to do viruses. We're going to do... Well, that didn't work so well. What's the end result of teaching something? So we advanced a little bit. Then we decided, okay, teach all you want, but are they learning anything? So instead, the emphasis was on learning. We'll give them an exam, and we'll test whether they were able to recall the information about viruses or parasites or whatever the subject is. Well, I was at that point. I had learned a lot of information. I had passed the exams, but I had utterly failed at the last one. When actually confronted with a patient with an opportunity to apply what I had learned, I had miserably failed. And so in an effort to bridge that gap, to move on to stage number 3, I began looking for a mentor. And it began with Sam Marks. He was an American physician living in Honduras who had been there for 30 years. Among the Mosquito indigenous people on the eastern coast of Honduras, some of you have been there. And one day, a woman brought her child. Now, she had all of her entire family, but there was one girl in particular who had a fever of 40, and headache and abdominal pain and the skin rash, and right in front of my eyes, she started convulsing. Generalized seizure. Well, young physician, I went to Dr. Marks and I said, help, this girl's convulsing. And of course, he's very calm, older guy, and says, well, what do you think could be the problem, Dr. Nicholas? And I had been on pediatrics at Children's Mercy, and I thought to myself, oh, febrile seizure. I bet she has pharyngitis or an ear infection, and that's why she's convulsing. And oh, Dr. Marks, he shook his head, and it's like, what do they teach you in school anymore? And so we took some blood to the laboratory, and we stained it, and with Giemsa, and what am I looking at here? Red blood cells with a stained ring-form parasite. It's malaria, that's right. And this child is seizing. And so it is by definition cerebral malaria, has about a 10% mortality. And so we began treating this girl for her cerebral malaria, intravenous medication, oxygen, fluids, and 2 or 3 days later, she began to wake up. And as I reflected on that, I thought, if I had not had my mentor to show me how to apply what I had learned, this child might be dead. Well, I finished my formal training and I moved to Angola. Now, you all know where Angola is, don't you? When you look at a map of Africa, Africa looks like this. So here we have the Sahara Desert, and here's Ethiopia and Kenya, and Angola is the right knee of the continent of Africa. Well, I mentioned the problem of landmines in Angola. Princess Diana was in Angola just a couple of weeks before her death, highlighting the fact that this nation had more landmines per capita than any other country in the entire world. 10 landmines per person. And I began learning lots about landmines, about the different kinds of injuries. There are those that are designed to explode a car. There are those that if you step on, it'll shoot a missile up into the air and explode to maim not only the person who stepped, but also those who are around them. John the Baptist was a middle-aged Angolan man. And like almost everyone in the country, he lived by farming. He grew corn. And so he awoke one morning, he took his sack of corn seed, and he trudged out to his field, saying goodbye to his children as he left. And he had a hoe, and he began digging, planting his corn seed. Well, the day wore on. And Dad didn't come home that night. And the children were beginning to wonder, what happened to Father? Where's Dad? And so they began searching. And in the waning darkness, they found their father lying in a pool of mud and blood without a leg. So they called the rest of their family, they packaged him up and started carrying him into the Kalukim hospital where I was on duty. And when this man arrived, he had a pulse, but no measurable blood pressure. He was unconscious, but still a few spontaneous movements. And so we gave him whole blood, which is the only blood product we had, and intravenous fluids. And he still had what was left of his leg. And so I had never managed a landmine amputation in Kansas City, let alone in Fort Worth. And so I went to my mentor. I said, Dr. Aroner, come help me. I don't know what to do with this child, this young man. And so we went to the operating room, and Dr. Aroner showed me how to do a below-the-knee amputation. Not in elective operating room criteria, but in a battlefield kind of situation with a man who was surely going to die. And so we completed his amputation, and I took him into recovery, still unconscious, barely any blood pressure. And I thought to myself, when I come back tomorrow, surely this bed will be empty. Well, I didn't sleep much that night. Came back in the morning, and instead there was this man sitting up in the bed. He was looking around the room, and his eyes landed on me, and he said, "What are you doing here? Você não é que sabe que aqui temos uma guerra muito grande e tão perigoso. Don't you know we have a war going on here? Why didn't you stay home?" Well, John the Baptist started to recover. His wound healed up, his pressure stabilized. He began learning how to walk with crutches. And a few weeks later, he went home. Well, I was shocked sometime thereafter to get a letter from him saying, "I don't know why you would come to a nation like this, but thank you for contributing to my recovery." Well, that night, I was pulling the door open, knew the soldiers were going to pile into my living room, what was going to happen to my kids. But instead, there wasn't any big rush. In fact, an older man came to the door in his uniform and he said, "May I come in?" And I was like, Sure, come on in. And may I have a seat? Sure, have a seat. So he sat down and he said, I want you to know that we're watching out for you. My soldiers, they're protecting you. And when you go out, you may not see us, but we're there. Now, I don't know whose side he was on. I wasn't about to ask. And as he got up to leave, he said, you know, you had an impact on my life. I have this brother. He was planting corn. He lost his leg. I think you know him. Applied learning through the facility of a role of a mentor, of a role model, is what helped me to move from simple head knowledge and the ability to pass a test to being able to apply that in my actual work. And so my challenge to all of us is find a role model. Find someone who is worthy of that kind of trust. Not someone who is simply good in their profession, but someone who has the motives, the personal skills that you might want to emulate. Someone that you would want to be like. And then as you graduate, become one. Become a person of the kind of qualities that others would want to emulate. And then make yourself available so that less experienced people can learn from your own example. Well, the war in Angola escalated, and I returned to Kansas City, home, and started teaching public health. And I was approached by all of these young people. Here at KU, you have individuals on staff who are fulfilling that role in your midst. Kimberly, would you stand for us? So Kimberly leads your Office of International Affairs. Not only people coming to KU from other nations, but also those of you who want to go study abroad. I wish there had been someone like Kimberly Connolly when I was a student here. She can help facilitate your own dreams, your own skills. Another person you need to meet is Joe LeMaster. Joe is in the Department of Family Medicine. During the years I was in Angola, he was in Nepal, providing not only a general hospital medical care, but also doing leprosy research. Some of you are familiar with the Bhutanese refugees in Kansas City. Dr. LeMaster is the person who runs that clinic. He speaks Nepali, which is the language of the Bhutanese refugees. Another exemplary person to get to know right here at KU. And I'm inspired by individuals who want to move beyond their comfort zone and do something profound on the part of the world's most marginalized. But there's questions connected with that kind of career. Do I need some special training? Who's going to pay me? How can I raise my children in this? Where do I serve? With what organization do I choose to work? And it's for all those reasons that 15 years ago, we established the Institute for International Medicine. It's a healthcare training center with the mission of
3 billion people live on less than $2.50 a day. These individuals are frequently forgotten, sick, poor, undereducated, minorities, disabled, elderly, refugees, and victims of war and disaster. Healthcare professionals and students are often highly motivated to serve. However, many feel ill-prepared in the face of cross-cultural barriers, unfamiliar diseases, and limited resources. INMED, the Institute for International Medicine, is a training center whose mission is to equip healthcare professionals and students to serve the forgotten. Since 2003, INMED is a federally recognized nonprofit education corporation. INMED emphasizes interactive learning, role modeling, and hands-on experience. INMED's offerings include self-paced online courses in core global health subjects, formal hybrid courses in both international medicine and international public health, supervised service learning healthcare experiences in numerous nations, credentialing in international medicine and public health, annual INMED humanitarian health conferences, accreditation of continuing education for physicians and nurses, and international healthcare academic programs. Thousands of INMED graduates passionately and skillfully care for the world's most vulnerable. Please join them. Explore more at inmed.us.
So our biggest event of the year is the Humanitarian Health Conference. Who's been to that event before? Awesome. So this will be the 14th year. We have about 500 people who gather near the sports complex for a day and a half of not only learning more about care for marginalized people, but also meeting the leaders of the organizations with whom you can partner to engage in this kind of work. Now, you can always go to their website, but to actually shake their hand and talk with them in person is a very precious opportunity. We have funding for students, undergraduate students of all kinds, including medicine, to participate in the conference. This is the coupon code that students would need. And outside where you checked in, there are some cards with the conference information and website and about some of the other offerings that INMED offers. We teach a comprehensive international medicine, nursing, and public health course. This course will be taught here at KUMC for the 4th year this fall. It's 10 weeks online. It requires about 5 hours of work each week. And then at the end of the online, we meet together for 2 days in classroom to apply those skills. Now, there are some basic epidemiology that are part of the course and that all of us in medicine need to know. Have you noticed that women live longer than men? You see, there are these behaviors that are inherently male that put us at risk for early demise. So we're innovative. Give us some duct tape, give us some WD-40, it can start at a very early age. Whatever it takes to get it done. Now, I find this one rather shocking. What do you suppose they're drinking, too? Huh? Well, all of this has been going on for a long time. Women living longer than men. What are they thinking? So, if you're interested in pursuing a career, then you're going to need to know some of the basic facts. And at the end of the 10 weeks online, we meet for some hands-on skills, some wound care, complicated obstetrics, newborn resuscitation, things that you can't learn online. Got to actually put on some gloves. And then with that kind of background, you're ready for a supervised, mentored health experience. So we cooperate with faculty in 25 countries throughout Asia, Africa, Middle East, Latin America, where we pair you up not simply with an academic institution, but with a person that we have found to be a credible role model. Not only someone from whom you can learn your particular healthcare skill, be it in dentistry, pharmacy, therapy, but someone whose life you might be able to actually emulate as you move forward. And so you can go to China and learn primary care with Edgar Wu. You can go to India with Anil Cherian and learn mother newborn care. You can go to Angola with Steve Foster and learn surgical care and orthopedics. You can go to Moscow, where we partner with the charity clinics and work with Isaac Inakovic. These are not group trips. We found that people will learn better if we pair you up one-on-one with a preceptor or even two-on-one. And then we recognize our graduates with a credential, with a professional diploma corresponding to their field in public health, in nursing, or in medicine. Moreover, graduates have got the skill to not only learn something, but figure out how to apply it. Now, in a moment, I'm going to pause, and I'm going to ask you to get in groups of 2 or 3. Turn to the person next to you, turn to the person behind you, and I'm going to give you these 2 questions that I'd like you to discuss. So, who is a credible role model in your life, an influential person that you have followed? And then what can you yourself do in order to be a better role model or to be more available on behalf of your learners? One of INMED's training sites is in Ghana, in West Africa. The Baptist Medical Center delivers 20 or 30 babies every day. If you want some OB experience, some newborn experience, yes. Well, I was there a couple of years ago and working with a INMED student, Iwoku, who was Ghanaian. And Iwoku came to me, he was very excited. "Oh, Dr. Nicholas, this woman is in labor, but the baby won't come. The baby won't come." And I said, "Okay, Iwoku, let's go examine her." And she was a petite little thing, but she had a term-sized uterus, and she was contracting hard when I put my hand on her abdomen. But the baby's head was still very high in the birth canal. And I said to Iwoku, "Well, let's let her labor for a couple of hours, and we'll check her once more." And so he came back 2 hours later. "Oh, Dr. Nicholas, this woman is in labor, but the baby won't come. She is suffering so much, this baby may die." So we went back and we examined her once more, and sure enough, her abdomen was tense with contractions, and the baby's head was still very high. And I turned to Iwoku and I said, "What do you think we should do?" "Oh, you must do a cesarean section. Save this woman. Save this baby." Well, I paused, a pregnant pause. And I said to Iwoku, "I think you should do the cesarean." "Oh, Dr. Nicholas, I've never seen this surgery before." And I said to Iwoku, "I'm leaving in 2 weeks. Who's going to be the doctor?" Oh, and he looked around. He realized it was going to be him. And so we went to the operating room, and I walked him through his first Caesar, and we spent the next couple of weeks not only doing Caesars, but also working through how do you manage common labor complications. Well, I came back to the U.S., but Iwoku is still in Ghana. He's still taking care of his people, still managing some complicated obstetrics. I think that was a good use of my time to provide some mentorship to help move him from what he had learned in school to actual patient care application. You too can be a skilled mentor. So please turn to your colleague and take a couple of minutes and work through this question. Who in your life has been an exemplary, inspiring role model? And what can you do to be better? To start wrapping up your conversation. So I would like to hear back from some of you. Who was a role model to yourself? I want you to just raise your hand and say it out loud.
My father.
Awesome. Father.
My aunt.
Aunt. Who else? Yes.
I had a pediatrician friend who served at a grant-based clinic in Wyoming, and she was my first kind of exposure to medicine and seeing the Latina serve a role in the Latino community. And so she became a person who I wanted to be as a doctor, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Former supervisor.
Former supervisor. Thank you.
A lady at church.
A lady at church. Yeah. Well, all of us have got someone significant in our lives. And then how do you carry that on? If you would be so vulnerable as to share, what do you think you could do to be a better role model? Raise your hand. Yes.
One thing that we talked about was reaching out to people who might need your help, because sometimes it's hard to reach out. Oh, God.
Could you say that once more?
We talked about reaching out to people who might need your leadership, because sometimes it's hard to reach out when you are the one who needs to be mentored.
Yes. Excellent. Yeah.
Trusting my team members and their abilities to get things done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
One thing we mentioned was being patient with others and taking the time to not just focus on yourself, but focus on others around you.
Where?
You know, one thing I've appreciated about being at KU Med is identifying individuals like yourself and Dr. Kessler, faculty who are willing to mentor students. And it's always amazing to me, as busy as these researchers and clinicians and people are, that they are always willing to spend time with the students and influence them and help them kind of navigate those questions and, you know, relative to their careers in global health. And I think that one thing that is helpful is when faculty make it known that they have that interest and that they're available, because we really rely heavily on people who are willing to be there, right? And so if we can expand that, I know there are people who have the same interest and who would be willing to mentor students and mentor maybe junior faculty as well and other people. But it's been a good example to me because I will get random emails from young people wanting to go into international work. And I'll be honest, sometimes my first thought is, oh my gosh, I'm so busy. I cannot afford to meet this person for coffee or, you know, lunch. How do I fit that in? And so I often try to remember, you know, the faculty here, the Dr. Kesslers, the Dr. Lemasters, who manage to find time. And so it just, sometimes I have to take a moment and then just be gracious and be willing to, you know, share time with those who ask for it.
Yeah. Beautiful.
We also talked about like not waiting for the future to be the role model that like we want to be, but like being willing to sacrifice and to start doing that now. So because like when I think about who I want to be, it's someone who doesn't get stuck in the day-to-day or like the mundane, but finds a way to make an impact every day, and then also still finds a way to like have your big dream and make big dream impacts. And so not waiting for like the degree and the residency to be over to start making impacts and to start being a role model, but to even where we are, just help someone who's maybe not as far along in the process.
You know, I like especially what you said about not waiting, you know, because there will always be another step in your career, you know, and so look for opportunities right now along the way. So I'm about to wrap up. Maybe you have got another pearl you want to share? Maybe you have a more general question or some bit of advice for the crowd? Let me give you a couple of final ideas. If you're going to be very effective in mentoring others, in sharing your skills, you're going to have to look at your life and where you spend your time. You may need to sort out some things, declutter slightly, in order to be available. So take a look at all aspects of your life. At your family relationships, at your finances, at your possessions, at all of the things that create so much noise in our lives, and see if you can calm that down just a little bit. And as you do that, then you may need to be intentional about clearing space. As Kimberly Connolly said, we have some faculty here who are pretty good at clearing space, but being aware of people who want time with us, who want to engage with us, being intentional about responding to them, about making yourself available is going to be important. And then you've got to stick at it. Tenacity. This is the cornerstone, the marker for the Calochem Hospital where I work in Angola. It was placed in 1924. 5 generations of professionals have served there since that time. What we're talking about is important, but it's also difficult, and there's always a temptation to move on to something else. So stick to those pure virtues that drew you into healthcare in the first place. Now, if I look at your application for profession school, it probably said something like finding a cure for some lethal disease, providing care for people who are in poverty, being a compassionate healthcare provider. So come back to those virtues, declutter your life, make yourself available, and be incredibly tenacious as you pursue forward your role to not only be an expert in your field, but also to foster other experts. Pleasure to be with you today. I would love to talk with you afterwards. Please stay around if you can.